on, let me get this. All right, our recording is started. All right, so adhering to time for everybody, I'm really pleased to have David Herring here from NOAA. He is a science writer and editor with extensive experience communicating about climate and earth science. David, you joined NOAA's Climate Program Office, I believe, in 2008?
That's correct.
That's correct. Where you served as Director of Communication and Education, Program Manager of NOAA's Climate.gov, and you also lead the climate literacy objective for NOAA's climate mission goal.
Yes.
Before coming to NOAA, you worked for 16 years in the Earth Sciences Division at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, where you served as Project Manager for Education and Outreach, Team Leader for NASA's Earth Observatory, and the Terra Satellite Missions Outreach Coordinator. I know you're trained. It's a very impressive resume. I know you're trained in journalism, science education, and science and technical communication from East Carolina University in North Carolina. And you're also a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. So we are very lucky to have you today. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about your work with NOAA and the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit, which I think is going to be extremely valuable for all the folks that are participating in the classes at Antioch. So with that, you have the screen.
Thank you, Krista. Thank you for that kind introduction. And hello, class. It's great to virtually meet you, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. I am teleworking from my mom's house in Morehead City, North Carolina. There may be a little background noise from time to time. I apologize in advance. But I understand we have maybe about an hour. Is that right, Krista? And you wanted a tour of the toolkit just to show people how to use it and what information is available through the toolkit, correct?
Yep, that would be perfect.
Okay. And in that hour, should I allow time for questions and so cut my talk shorter than an hour, or should I eat a whole hour and then there's more time for questions? I just want to pace myself.
I would say cut yourself short. So,
okay.
And with enough time before 6:30, that would be great so that folks can ask some questions.
Okay. All right. Very good. So I'll just mention my contact information is here. And if folks would like to follow up with me via email, I'm at david.herring@noaa.gov, and I'd be happy to follow up. I have shared this slide deck with Krista, and we can walk through the slide deck, but what I was thinking we could also do is just do a live interactive tour. So I wanted to introduce you all to the two documents I've shared with Krista so that you guys can also on your own time go back and play with the Climate Resilience Toolkit, or the CRT as we call it. And it's really a site that's designed to just, to find your way by playing. And you'll see that in a minute when I go into the site. This screenshot here gives the web address. It's at https://toolkit.climate.gov. And I'll say a few words about it in just a moment. But I'll also jump over here. I've also shared this document, which is sort of a hands-on guide that it's sort of a step-by-step series of instructions that you can also go in and jump into the toolkit. It's sort of a take you by the hand and guide you through the site if you'd like. So there's a series of tasks. The first one is if you'd like to explore how climate conditions are changing at your location and how they're projected to change, this sequence of steps will walk you through it. And then you can find and use decision support tools in the Climate Resilience Toolkit. And again, these are just some suggested tasks you can do to learn by playing. How might you locate authoritative, citable information about a topic or region of interest in the site? And again, there's some suggested activities that you can do. It's almost like a scavenger hunt, if you will, using the site. A lot of people like to use the site Steps to Resilience to make and implement an adaptation or a resilience plan. And this walks you through there. And then how to find reports or case studies or other information, essentially learning from others who have successfully taken action. And that walks you through that bit. And then finally, finding expert guidance. What we've heard in listening sessions is that people not only want to find authoritative information that they can use, but they often like to be able to reach out or reach through the toolkit and find a human who has expertise in their region and in their topic of interest. So I'm not going to step through this in detail. I just wanted to quickly orient you to the two documents that I've made available for you. They can serve as reference documents for you. And I'm going to go and surf on the live site. And Krista and you all in the class, you can let me know if it's working out well this way, or if you'd rather I go back and just talk to the screenshots. But the web address, and we update the frame, if you will, the photograph, I would say about once a month or so. So it's a different background shot. But this is the Climate Resilience Toolkit. It's available online at toolkit.climate.gov. And I like to say that this website is an integrating framework in which we reach, working with partners all across the U.S. federal government, in partnership with all of the 13 federal agencies of the U.S. Global Change Research Program. We pulled together this framework as kind of a public-friendly point of entry to find and discover what exists in this context. And so I'm going to roughly follow along what I was recommending in that activity sheet, and then you can sort of double back. But some of the main, and then play around with the site on your own if you like, but some of the main things that people like to do when they come to the toolkit is they want to learn how to build resilience, or they want to make their own resilience plan, and so they're seeking guidance on that. They like to learn by seeing what others are doing, or they want to explore climate conditions in their location. And so kind of roughly following along in the order of the activity sheet, we'll start there. So if I click Use the Climate Explorer, it scrolls me down on the page. You'll notice I can just scroll up and down. But if I click that button, it jumps me down to sort of a preview pane. And it's telling me about the Climate Explorer. This is kind of a digital poster saying, here's what it is and here's what you can do. And then this button here will launch the Climate Explorer. So if I click the button, you'll notice I'm actually jumping out to a tool page. It launches a new tab in my web browser. And now I'm in the Climate Explorer. It's branded to be, clearly associated with the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit. But this is actually hosted over at UNC Asheville. And so one of our partners that we work very closely with. I'll just pause to see if you guys are seeing this response in near real time when I'm clicking these buttons, or if there's a delay.
So far, so good, David. On my end, I think we're seeing everything.
Okay, very good. Sometimes on screen share tools, there's a several second delay. When you come into the Explorer, then you'll notice what you can do on the right-hand side. There's sort of the three main pathways into the tool. You can focus in on a place. Most people like to do place-based explorations, but if you're interested in specific climate variables, you can view by variable. And then we also have individual monitoring stations for weather and tidal monitoring. And I'm going to kind of tour you quickly through all of those. But we'll start by selecting a location. So some of you, are you guys in Manchester, New Hampshire?
We are in Keene, New Hampshire, but Manchester's kind of close.
Okay. I'll pick Manchester then, just for grin, since I have it typed in. And you'll notice it auto-populates, and there are more than one Manchester in the United States. So sometimes people get confused and they write to us and say, hey, something's wrong with your site. And it's like, no, you used the wrong pop-down. So make sure you're choosing the location of interest. In this case, we're interested in Manchester, New Hampshire, which, if hopefully our tool is correct, it's in Hillsborough County. Is that right?
Yep, that is right.
Okay. So when you arrive in this, you'll notice then you can scroll down, or you can jump to specific sets of variables such as temperature, precipitation, or other decision-relevant variables. So if I click on temperature, it scrolls me down. And down the left-hand side, there's this menu of different variables. And then what I'm seeing here in the main part of the screen is a chart showing me several things. It's showing me what has been, is the sort of 30-year climatology for the variable being shown, in this case, average daily maximum temperature. And this line here is the 30-year average from 1961 to 1990. And then each bar is each year's departure from average. So you'll notice in that county, some years are warmer than average, some years are cooler than average, and you can see how that goes. The envelope in the gray is the ensemble of about 30, roughly 36 models, global climate models that have been downscaled for Hillsborough County. And so this is the envelope of all values output by all of the models. And so what you're seeing is that essentially the observed values are falling pretty nicely right within that envelope. And then extending out from about 2008 into the future till about 2100, there are two other envelopes. These are two different scenarios. These are plausible future scenarios. One is a reference to what we call representative concentration pathway 8.5 in red and 4.5 in blue. And you say, well, what the heck does that mean? What that means is if the sum total of choices that humanity makes into the future should increase the radiative forcing at the surface by 8.5 watts per square meter over pre-industrial values, such as through the emission of heat-trapping gases, then this is what we would expect for this parameter in this county. And so the median value is shown here. So you can see that, going out into the future, then the average daily maximum temperature, whereas it had been right around 57 degrees Fahrenheit, that's for a year, that's an annual average, is projected to increase over the course of the century. And you can pick other variables of interest. So for example, I may be interested in very hot days. For example, the number of days per year in which temperature exceeds 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And so you don't typically get very many days in that county above 95, historically anyway, you haven't. But you can see how out through the course, one or two, say, per year, maybe three on average. And then, say, by the year 2030, that number is expected to go up. And then by the year 2050, as many as 10 days out of the year. And by the end of the century, as many as 40 or more. Some of the models are predicting many more. So you can ask the tool to help you with interpretation. You'll see as I clicked how to read this, and as I'm hitting the next button, it's kind of giving me this little call out that's sort of explaining to me what this value means. And I can play around. And if I want to learn more about, well, what is RCP 4.5, what is that telling me, I can jump out to read more about it. So it's designed to be user-friendly. I can download an image if I want to pop it into a poster or a PowerPoint. And over here on the right, I can also download the data behind this chart. So we have other decision-relevant variables. I'm going to move on pretty quickly here, just in the interest of time. But we have precipitation values, including total precip, as well as, say, number of days per year in which precip exceeded 1 inch or 2 inches or 3 inches. And so, or the number of dry days. And then a lot of planners and engineers and architects and designers like variables like heating degree days or cooling degree days, or people in agriculture or forestry like growing degree days. And so these are other variables that are relevant. And we're going to be adding more variables over time, but it's a way to compare what is quote unquote climate normal for our location to how conditions are projected to change out into the future. So if I want to go back to the home level, I can select view by variable and get a national scale map. So for example, I showed you the number of very hot days for your county. I may be interested in looking at days above a particular temperature threshold. I usually home in on, say, 95 degrees, which I think is a very hot day. It gives me a preview screen telling me what I'm going to see and what it means, and then I say get started. And what it does is it loads up a national map Again, it's telling me the variable I'm looking at is days with max temp above 95 degrees. And if I want to learn more about that, I can ask for more information. In this case, it's color coded. The darker the red, up to 175 days out of the year in which temperatures equal or exceed 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And on the left-hand side, this is showing me the historical average, 1961 to 1990. And on the right-hand side, this is showing me what is projected in the higher emission scenario. But I can toggle over and say, well, I'd like to see the lower emission scenario. And so what's kind of interesting there is, our country and our world have two, or multiple paths we could choose. This doesn't have to be our future, in other words, but some parts of the country could experience roughly half the days out of the year in which temperatures reach or exceed 95 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of the century, which is kind of a sobering thought. So it's a way to kind of compare. And then again, if I would like to, I can select on a particular county of interest. So clicking on one, Merrimack County, and then jump out and see the variable that I'm showing for that particular county. So I can look at location specific or county specific data or national scale data. I can look at weather and tidal station data as well. So I may like to compare, say, what is the daily weather looking like as compared to the local climatology for that monitoring station. So if I choose Get Started, it brings me into a map. I'm going to center it up a little bit. I'm going to zoom in to close to your neck of the woods up there. And you'll see that all these red dots are monitoring station locations. And so if I picked one sort of at random near you, I just picked West Hampstead. What you're seeing here on the left-hand side is weather, which are the daily high-low temperature values in blue, the blue bars, superimposed on climate normal for the span of a year. So that green range is the 30-year average or climatology for this particular station. So what I can do is if I go backwards through time, it starts to fill in the actual data. So I'm seeing weather superimposed on climate normal. On the right-hand side, what I can see is your rainfall accumulation over the course of the year. And so, for example, in 2016, that must have been a dry year up there because you were in a rainfall deficit overall. And so the triangle shows you normal, and the data here is showing you what was actually received. And then if you come forward in time, you can scroll and you can see, well, in other years you were about normal or maybe even above normal. And I can zoom in or I can zoom out by holding down my shift key if I want to actually get at, your values for a particular time. So in short, the Climate Explorer is, I wanted to also show you the tidal stations. We also have projections of the number of days with high tide flooding. And so this would be a minor flooding threshold or a nuisance flooding threshold. So if I get started, again, there's a national map where we have tidal stations around the United States. So if I zoom in, find one sort of near you, I'll choose Boston, just at random here. And so again, what you can see is the number of days per year, and I can probe these little bars to get actual values. So, historically, 3 or 4 or 5 days out of the year with minor flooding or nuisance flooding, what we call sunny day or high tide flooding. And then going out into the future, you can see for those two scenarios, the number of days that are projected in Boston to receive high tide flooding. And out by the end of the century, due to sea level rise, under the higher emission scenario, almost every day, beginning to approach every day with high tide flooding. So this is a way to kind of lift up into your web browser and explore changing climate conditions and to be thinking about assets or populations or property that can be affected. So that's just a high-level overview of the Climate Explorer. I'm going to close that tab and go back to the Climate Resilience Toolkit, I want to introduce you to a couple of other parts of the toolkit. One is our Steps to Resilience process. It's a 5-step planning process. I like to characterize these as the quote-unquote action verbs of resilience planning. We recognize, of course, that adaptation planning and resilience planning is not a linear process, and it's not so easy as necessarily what we're representing here. But this gave us kind of a convenient way to allow people to navigate through the site and for us to kind of group and chunk and contextualize information. If you want to get sort of an overview, there's a video here that you can click to watch this movie. You're just introducing you to the steps to resilience. But essentially what's happening is step number 1, people are asking the question, did you know? Assets we care about are exposed to extremes, maybe extreme rainfall and flooding, or maybe extreme heat and drought, or maybe sea level rise and storm surge. And if assets we care about are exposed, they may have vulnerability, and we want to explore their vulnerability and quantitatively assess the risk. And then this is sort of asking the question, why should I care? Well, maybe assets that I care about or that I manage, it can be natural resources, it can be human population, it can be economic assets or infrastructure, they may be at risk. And if I'm unwilling to tolerate that risk, then I may want to move into these steps 3 through 5, which are asking the question, what can we do about it? And these steps are designed to kind of move people into considering what types of options or actions might I take, what are the costs and benefits of those, and how might I prioritize and plan based on those and actually move into taking action. So that's sort of a high-level overview of the steps to resilience. I consider this, I've just clicked the button and it's jumped me into the step 1 page. Again, for every step, there's an overview video. This one runs about 1 minute. It's kind of introducing you to what is involved in step number 1. As you scroll down on the page, you'll notice there's sort of narrative text kind of explaining what's going on in step number 1. You'll be engaging with stakeholders and deciding how to work together. And we've also developed an Excel spreadsheet that you can download if you want to use this as a tool to take notes as you're moving people through a resilience planning process. And then over here in the right-hand margin, there are some case studies in our compendium. We have over 140 case studies from all over the country and every economic sector. And so here are some quick links out to case studies introducing you to people in certain locations that have already taken step 1. And here are different tools that are available in our tools compendium, which is here. We have over 380 tools in our online compendium of tools that are designed to help people explore their exposure to climate-related hazards. So for example, here's a quick link to the Climate Explorer, but there are other tools as well. So each step in the Steps to Resilience has its own specific landing page with specific outlinks to case studies and specific outlinks to tools, as you can see. And there's really kind of a no wrong door approach to navigating the toolkit, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So for example, if I come back to the main screen, just by clicking the logo here, it brings me back to the main screen. Suppose I want to see what others are doing. I'm interested in finding case studies that show others taking action. So if I click that button, it jumps me into this preview page. There's an interactive map pinpointing the locations of all the different case studies. Or if I want to browse them all, I can click this button here and it jumps me into this page. I can zoom in if I want to sort of browse them all. As I say, there's about 140 or so from around the country. But I can also quickly filter. So for example, if I'm interested in, say, case studies that have to do with temperature extremes or maybe extreme precipitation. I know that's a problem where rainfall has been increasing in the Northeast. So it starts to subset, and this is fully Boolean. So maybe I'm interested in, say, built environments and built environments that are exposed. And I'm interested in those locations or those case studies where people have done a vulnerability assessment or a risk assessment. So I'm going to click to filter. And so you can see each time I turn on, and I can filter by region. And each time I'm filtering, it's winnowing down the number of case studies. So if I scroll down, there are these different case studies available, and this might be one of interest, using demonstration storms to prepare for extreme rainfall. So if I click the link, it jumps me into this particular case study. It's introducing me to this town. In this case, it's in South Central Wisconsin. And it's telling me here on the right that they got all the way to step number 2, assessing vulnerability and risks. And I can read the narrative of the case study and understand sort of what was some of the issues and what was in play. And in the right-hand side, you see all the different tools that were relevant to this particular case study. And these are the tools that are available in our tools compendium. So if I was interested in a specific tool, for example, the FEMA Flood Map Service Center, maybe that was a tool of interest that's featured in this particular case study. You'll notice if I jump sideways into the tools compendium, I'm on this particular tools page. And similarly, it's giving me an overview narrative of what this tool is about, what is its purpose, who uses it, and how do they use it. And it's telling me here that this tool is especially relevant to people who are looking to take steps 1 or 2, exploring hazards or assessing vulnerability and risk. I can jump out to the specific web page where this tool is available. And then it's also telling me these are all the topics and subtopics in the toolkit that, that this tool is relevant to. And then down below, here are all the case studies in the toolkit showing this tool in action. So in other words, the toolkit itself is fully crosswalked. And so that's what I meant when I said there's kind of a no wrong door approach to navigating the site. You can come in specifically first to the case study section, or you can come in first to the tools section, or in the steps to resilience section, whichever is of interest to you, and you can kind of quickly crosswalk and find what is relevant or available to you based on your interests. So that's kind of what I've shown you how to do. I'm sorry, I'm jumping back into the case studies. In the activity guide that I showed you, those step-by-step instructions, it's kind of walking you through the process of locating a case study of interest to you, whether it might be something like human health or extreme heat or precipitation or sea level rise and storm surge, what have you. These are the different types of topics that you can search and sort in. And again, similarly, in the tools section, if you want to browse all tools, it has that same capability. I can browse by topic. Say I'm interested in a tool that would be relevant to coastal planning. So I'm interested in built environments near the coast. So I'm filtering that way. Again, maybe I'm interested in, I could be interested in analyzing and downloading data or recover and rebuild from a disaster, that type of thing. Or maybe I just want to identify my vulnerabilities. So I'll click that one. Again, I'm interested in, doing a vulnerability assessment. And I'm particularly interested in the Northeast, tools that are especially relevant to the Northeast. So again, I've subset it here. Now I've reduced from about 360 tools to ones that are specifically relevant to the Northeast that are out there. And let me just skim through to see if I can find one. Maybe the Coastal Flood Mapper Exposure. This is a tool that serves leaders who want to support a community-based approach to assessing coastal hazard risks and vulnerabilities. It provides maps that show people, places, and natural resources that are exposed to coastal flooding. And so There's the description. There's where I can go to access the tool. Again, you see that crosswalk capability. And in cases where there is a tutorial online to kind of take me by the hand and teach me how to use the tool, that's linked to as well. So again, just to reiterate something I mentioned earlier, you can think about the toolkit as a framework, an integrating framework in which we provide context. We pulled together lots of information from all across the federal government and its grantees, such as entities in academia or nonprofits or research labs. And we've brought it together, using this terminology and using these frames of reference to enhance its discoverability, and to show you sort of where and what's available in response to users' interests. So you could kind of reach through the toolkit and find what's available and interesting to you. So in the steps to resilience, then coming back to the main page, this button takes you into the steps to resilience process. This is sort of taking you into the case studies, which is also here. You can see what others have been doing to adapt and build resilience. The Climate Explorer demonstrated. But suppose, and as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that we often hear is, now that I've done some of this, I realize I have questions or I need help formulating questions. I may like to engage with an expert who has done a deeper analysis, or who I could engage to work with me to do a deeper analysis or a specialized downscaled model, those types of things. So I may want to select on expertise. And there are different pathways you see here. So there's a Find Experts tool. If you want to locate someone near you or in your region who might be able to hold your hand or interact or answer your questions, that can take you there. There are reports for your state and for your region that you can browse. And then there are specific state climate summaries where there's already pre-digested information. I'll just quickly jump through some of these to kind of give you a feel for it. So if I'm interested in locating an expert, I'm going to scroll up to the map, and I can zoom in or out if I want to. It's an interactive map. Every state has a climatologist. So I can zoom in and say, I'm interested in locating my New Hampshire state climatologist. And so that's who this person is. I can go to her website. Or maybe I'm interested in, say, a regional climate center. These are data centers where a lot of data products are available and detailed analyses specific to my region. And it tells you, what does the center specialize in? What areas or states do they serve? And so on and so forth. In your case, it's the Northeast Regional Climate Center. It's based at Cornell University in Ithaca. And Art De Gaetano, if you don't know him, he runs a great shop, and it's a wonderful website with lots of data and access services.
Yeah, David, I was just about to say that I was going to give them a plug. Yeah, their website is fantastic.
Yeah, and so this links you straight there. And there are others like the National Weather Service or River Forecast Centers and so forth. The RESA, so there's different entities as well as in USDA has its regional climate hubs. Department of the Interior has climate science centers and landscape conservation cooperatives. And so just a wealth of expertise out there that you guys can tap into. So coming back to expertise, a lot of people I clicked on reports, and I may be interested specifically in reports that are relevant to New Hampshire. So we have 8 in our reports compendium. So I filtered by state. I may want to say I'm interested in action plans. So there's a New Hampshire Climate Action Plan that you can access. And learn more about what has been discussed for your state. But you can filter by topic. There's lots of ways. And if you realize, I want to start over, and just click the clear. Every time I turn on a filter, I can go back and say, no, I want to undo that by clear filters. So it's a quick way to kind of winnow and locate, reports that others have produced who have been deliberating on climate resilience. And I wanted to show you real quickly, again, we're going to leave the site. We're going to jump over to the state climate summaries page. And if I'm interested in New Hampshire or any given state, I can browse and I can click on the state of interest. And this was sort of a precursor to the U.S. National Climate Assessment. And so a climate summary for the state of New Hampshire has been prepared. I can look at the key messages if I want to. What are the sort of the high-level executive summary messages, the quick takeaways? And then I can scroll down and move into specific narrative language showing projections, what has been happening, how has New Hampshire been changing climatologically over time in terms of like temperature, number of hot days or warm nights, annual precip, summer precip, and how that's shifting over time, and so on and so forth. So you can see there's a lot of sort of produced content that you can go in and sort of, this is very quotable, very citable, pre-produced information if you want an executive summary of the climatology of a given state. I'm going to close that. Whoops, I think I closed my whole website. No, I didn't. I just changed my view. Let me go back over here. Okay. I'm just looking at the clock. I'm going to start to wind down here. The last couple of areas I want to show you, if I start at the top again, we also have both regional and topical narrative information. So under topics, there is topical narrative information in these different areas. So, I may be interested in, say, built environments or ecosystems. There's sort of these quick takeaway points about, how things have been changing. And then there's a summary narrative information if I'm interested in ecosystems. And then in the right hand,
I think we've lost you.
Oh, is everything okay?
Just your name on the screen and mine.
Oh, I can hear you, David. I'm not sure why he'd be missing for you, Ken, but I think everybody can hear him still.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Can you still see my screen, or did I obscure the screen?
No, we can't see your screen right now. All we can see are is everybody's head.
Okay.
But we can hear you.
Yeah, let me go back to see if I can minimize that. Sorry, I accidentally clicked on a button, and what I did is I went into this view that I'd like to minimize.
It's all right. It'll come back.
Going back into speaker view. And I'm just going to bring this over here. I accidentally clicked on the control panel and it zoomed out into like a big window. Is that better?
No, not yet, but there's sometimes a delay. You might have to click share your screen one more time. It might have taken you out of it.
Okay.
Let's just see.
I'm going to unshare and then share.
Share. Yeah, let's try that. Perfect. All right. It's back to the Toolkit website.
Okay. My apologies. So yeah, what I was showing you is I jumped into a topic. So if I jump into topics, there's these different topics in which information has been made available, and there's narrative text. So I can choose a topic of interest, maybe coasts or ecosystems or what have you. I'm just picking one at random. I'll just jump over into coasts. There's sort of the key points. There's narrative information down the main body of the page here as I'm scrolling down. But you'll notice in the right-hand side, there are subtopics that are relevant to coasts, such as sea level rise or coastal erosion or storm surge and so forth, inland flooding. If I'm concerned about, say, storm surge, I can click there, and now it jumps me to the storm surge subtopic page. And now you'll see there's further crosswalking. In the right-hand margin, all of the case studies that have to do with storm surge are here, featured tools and related tools are down the right-hand side. So again, there's that no wrong door approach that I made mention of. So topics and subtopics here, and then regions. We don't have every region of the U.S., but we do have the Northeast. So if I select Northeast, again, we have sort of a summary digest and down the left-hand side, and some of the subtopics having to do with people and communities in the Northeast, infrastructure in the built environment, agriculture and ecosystems, and building resilience. So if I click on one of those, again, you can see that crosswalked nature that I was describing, case studies and tools relevant to the Northeast. So what I wanted to do in this session at a high level is just show you a quick guided tour of the toolkit. I kind of introduce it to you as a framework that can help you explore and discover. In the slide set I've given Krista to share with you guys, there are a lot of screenshots and a lot more contextual information and definitions and explanatory details. And I consider it as kind of a quote unquote slidument, if you will, a half document, half slide set that can help you also further learn by exploring, as well as that hands-on set of instructions that you can go in and play and make things happen. So I encourage you to do that. And if you have questions or hit a tripping point or anything, or have feedback, I'd be very interested to hear about it. But maybe with that, I'll just pause and open it up to see if folks have any questions or comments in the time we have remaining.
Great, thank you, David. Just so that the everybody knows, I did send out in an email earlier the activity sheet to everybody, but the slide share, it's actually great. It's very comprehensive and it is a big document. So I actually put a link to it to the Google Drive that I have for participants on both Sakai course websites. So if you go to where David is listed as a speaker on the Sakai site, you'll see a little link that says presentation or presentation slides. And we'll have this recording up there tomorrow, but until then, you can click on that and you can see the slides, and you might be able to download them as well, just so everybody has that.
And this is what it looks like. So, I kind of introduced you to key concepts. So there's a lot of high level information, talking about the fact that resilience building is not a linear process. And it's very contextualizing. So sometimes when people go to the toolkit, I think they expect to go to the toolkit and just get answers. And instead, it doesn't give you answers. It's a framework that allows you to explore and discover as a function of sort of what it is you want to do, but mainly to help people move through a resilience planning process. And that's kind of the grist of those slides.
Right. And it's really good with doing that, David. I love the fact that, like you were saying, you can even in the process of trying to do the planning, you even have an Excel sheet that you can click on that kind of also helped you in terms of templates and being able to guide you through the process. I found it very helpful. I also find very helpful, which people sometimes skip doing, all of the little videos for each part of the process. I think they're great overviews and really help people contextualize what they're about to learn. I think that's also very useful, is to take a look at the videos that go along with each step.
I appreciate that feedback. When we were thinking about the design of the toolkit, we were trying to do two things simultaneously. We wanted to, there are a lot of people in this country who are at square one, and are just trying, where do I get started? What do I do here? I feel lost and overwhelmed. And so we wanted to be able to take those people by the hand, and gently move them into this process. But at the same time, we did not want to frustrate the power user or the expert who wanted to be able to have fast paths to go right to what they wanted, And so we were trying to strike a delicate balance. And of course, recognizing that most of the information we offer is not our own, but that we're integrating it and allowing people to discover and use it. So it was a bit of a balancing act in designing the site, but it probably has some room for improvement. But on the other hand, we feel like we've come a long way.
Right, exactly. So two things, David, just so you know, what we tend to do is now I'll open it up for questions from the group. So people will be able to unmute themselves and ask a question, or you could throw it in the chat box. What tends to happen a lot of the time is we do get a lot of questions after the fact. So I try to compile them and
Hmm.
kind of organize them. And if you don't mind, send them along to you. Just short, any kind of short response you might have for them is usually helpful. But they usually come in after people, I think, distill or play around with it, or get a chance to think about everything that they've seen. I just wanted, before I open it up to questions, I just wanted you to be aware that some participants that are on this or that are going to watch the recording are actually going to be working on a pretty large project with ASAP this spring. And
Nice.
yeah, and we're going to be helping update the living guide, the principles. And so I think it'll be great for folks. One small team, I think, will be looking at the case studies in the climate resilience toolkit to see if there's anything new or things that might have been missed in terms of showing relevance to those principles. So I think that'll be helpful for folks that are going to be working on that project as a definitely a very valuable resource.
Terrific. That sounds great.
Yeah. So it looks like we've got a few questions already. One is, how are case studies chosen for the toolkit, and can anyone submit case studies? Are they peer reviewed? That's the first.
Great question. When we started, um, we had, I'm showing on screen now, these topic areas. And behind every one of these topic areas, we formulated a virtual team of experts from across the federal government who were subject matter experts in these areas. And we went first for the low-hanging fruit. We basically asked them what information exists, what tools exist, what case studies exist. Even if it's already been produced and published somewhere, we can redevelop it. So that's how we started. Fast forward to today, we have developed a PDF template and a contributor's guide so that others can develop and submit case studies if they wish. We have two excellent managing editors, co-managing editors, Luann Dahlman and Nina Hall, who work with me and for me, who are just fabulous to work with. And so if folks reach out to them, or if you want me to, Krista, I can share with you those templates.
Great.
And you can share them with your class, and folks can contribute.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. I noticed there's another question that somebody noticed the guideline for considering traditional knowledge in climate change initiatives on the right on one of the pages. I think yeah. What is that, and where has that been done? They're asking.
Guideline. So was that a specific tool?
I think so.
Let's see if I can move this out of the way. I didn't mention the search tool too, but I'll just.
Oh, that's neat. Yeah.
Let me see if I can. Guideline for traditional knowledge. I'm wondering if this is it, or guidelines for considering traditional knowledges and climate change initiatives.
Yep, right there.
Okay.
Let's take a look at that.
We worked with the Bureau of Indian Affairs in the Tribal Nations section. And specifically, you may know Margaret Herzog and Sean Hart and others helped us pull together this information. And so this is a guideline. So it's in our tool compendium. And the link, would be here. So this would be kind of a fast path using the search tool.
Right.
I'm not sure if I'm answering the question. If there was a specific question.
I think that was, I think you did. I mean, I think we're looking at where it is now, and I think that person or anybody interested in it, they can click on that tool and see where it takes you.
Yes.
Perfect. And then I'm going to give it just another couple minutes to see if anybody throws in a question. Again, like I said, sometimes people, it takes a while of downloading and processing before questions come up. But I'm just curious, how often I mean, I know there was a little bit of a break in things that were going on, but how often, I mean, you mentioned the two people and the template, so I'm assuming that this is a consistently ongoing, like you're saying, with updates. It seems like this is almost like a living tool. It seems like you're consistently coming back in here to add things and to make it more comprehensive.
Thank you. Yes. I like to think of the toolkit itself as a tool. It's a tool for discovery, as you say, and to be that framework and to provide that context and those frames of reference that I described. I like to think of the steps to resilience as a tool.
Right.
It's a guide to kind of, it's sort of addressing the question of, if you had a group of municipal planners and business leaders and policy leaders from a particular city gathered around the table, they have different understanding, different motivations, different levels of scientific understanding, and so on and so forth, different values. So how do they come together and arrive at a point of shared understanding and build together a shared mental model about what is their exposure, what are their risks, are they willing to tolerate that risk, and if not, are they willing to make an investment, and so on and so forth. And so, to me, that's highly non-trivial. I think technical problems are readily solvable. It's the human and human relationship problems that can be really challenging, as you know.
Right.
And so this guide is designed to move people sort of through that process and sidestepping the politics of climate change and global warming, but instead more focusing on what are the things that we value, such as local infrastructure or natural resources that we all rely upon, and is that at risk? And if it is, and we're not willing to tolerate that risk, what can we do to protect it? That tends to move people outside of a polarized frame, right, and into a frame of taking action. Now, coming back to your question, though, we wanted to be able to situate it into the context of climate science. And so this information was extracted from, say, the National Climate Assessment and other similarly authoritative assessments. If you jump into any one of these, you'll see that we've adapted the information. We need to go back and update this for the regions and for the topics. So it is kind of a living document in which we're going to increasingly seek to crosswalk it with the National Climate Assessment, and then also to try to develop other tools in a more crowdsourced way in the future. As people move into exploring their exposure locally, we want to implement a new feature in the future using story maps, where people can use GIS technologies to geolocate assets and information and develop story maps where they're mapping their own exposure. And maybe one day over time, we can kind of have a federated approach in the toolkit where people can browse other people's story maps for lots of locations across the country. So in short, yes, we see it as a living document. We want to be able to work in partnership broadly, not just across the government, but evolving to work also with communities and businesses and nonprofits to extend our reach.
Yeah, exactly. There's one question that came in. I don't know if you could quickly look it up in your data set. How up to date is the extreme rainfall events in terms of the data? Like what year is that from?
In the state assessments?
Yeah, if it's state or national, are they typically usually the same in terms of how recent they are, or do you find that one is a little bit more up to date?
These data were this summary was produced just within the last couple of years. It was within the last 2 years. So it's quite recent.
That's great.
And then if you jump out of here and into the National Climate Assessment, that was just published at the end of last year.
Right.
As far as the data that I showed in the Climate Explorer, for example, the monitoring stations, we're updating that. The daily weather is being updated each day.
Yeah.
And but and the observations probably each year. The historical observed is updated every year, but the projections are not changing. We'll probably update that less frequently because the projections aren't really changing that often.
Yeah, great. Well, David, thank you. I don't know if we have more questions coming in, but just a quick question for you on learning more about the toolkit. Are there any conferences coming up, or do you have workshops where you actually do trainings on the toolkit in person, or have a training coming up at any conferences in case any of these practitioners or students were interested?
Thank you. Yes. For example, there will be sessions at the National Adaptation Forum in which we talk about the toolkit, and we talk about a sort of a companion activity that we have ongoing. We're establishing what we call a resilience ecosystem, and this refers to the community of practitioners, of adaptation professionals. And we are making available, in partnership with the Climate Resilience Fund, which is a nonprofit grant funding organization, we have both made available $150K each in matching funds to incentivize collaboration among the national community of adaptation professionals, and to sort of galvanize people to work together to find innovative ways to kind of snap together new tools or new techniques or different approaches. So that's one thing I'm excited about, and some of the different pilot projects that were launched after the first year of our resilience ecosystem workshop we had last January, a year ago January. We'll be talking about those also at the National Adaptation Forum. Both I and partners working with me, others who helped develop this site, we work with municipalities in different places, and it's usually sort of opportunistic. When opportunities arise, we will engage and work with them directly to move them through the steps to resilience process, and help them develop an action plan. I also partner with nonprofits like the Association of Climate Change Officers, or ACO. They've been doing a series they call the Climate Fundamentals Academies in Colorado and in Maryland, and we'll be in Chicago. I'll be in Chicago Monday and Dallas Thursday of next week, training municipal leaders and planners on the toolkit, and just teaching them the basics of climate science. So I do a variety of teachings and trainings associated with this.
Great. And just so everybody knows, the National Adaptation Forum, you can look at it. I think you can get to a link to it off the EcoAdapt website. If budget is an issue, sometimes there are travel grants for municipal folks, and then there are also sometimes volunteer opportunities for reduced registration if you're willing to work part of the conference. So something to think about and take a look at if you're interested. It is coming up in April in Madison, Wisconsin. So, and David, I see you've got the website up for people to take a look at. So that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, perfect. We love to stick with the time. This was great and very succinct. Like I said, for everybody that's been on, you can check out the Sakai site to see the slides. You can send questions to me and I'll compile them all together so that David only receive one document of questions. And then I will put this recording online as soon as I can get it up tomorrow. But David, thank you again so much for talking with us. We really appreciate your time. And I'm sure you'll be hearing from us very soon about the U.S., the Climate Resilience Toolkit. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. It was an honor and a pleasure to be here. I enjoyed it. Y'all have a great evening.
Yep. Everybody have a good night. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.